Hi, today's video I am going to go over 3 methods that you could use to possibly determine if you want to make some changes on your painting. And the first method, actually this is a painting that I'm currently working on, so it's not finished. I have some white areas that I haven't painted yet. I have some things that still need some layers, and I'm kind of working through it. And this painting is a little different for me because it is a compilation of a couple different images, and then I'm kind of pushing my, what I want to say, my storytelling, I guess, because basically this is all the same hummingbird, and I'm wanting to make it feel like this bird is moving down and then coming up to the flower over here. So I've got motion streaks happening, and which I am going to make some adjustments on those still. Some of these are a little not standing out as much. And then I've got some softer edges in some of the wings so that these do feel like they're in motion. And then my other thing that I've got going on is I wanted some movement in the background around the birds. And so those background areas that are very soft and wispy looking, those are done wet on wet. And so I'm kind of building this painting as I go. And so compositionally, I feel like some a change might need to happen. And one of the ways to look at it, and I do have some leaves drawn in this corner, so you may see that, but it may be a little hard. It's in pencil. But before I decided to make that change, I actually took tracing paper, and so this is just a piece of tracing paper, and I laid it on my painting, and then I took paint and I painted on those on the tracing paper. So the tracing paper is definitely not a perfect watercolor source because it does wrinkle, but it will hold the paint from going through the tracing paper, and you might want to test your tracing paper just to make sure that that is the case. But you can paint on tracing paper, and it does help if you use paint that is not too wet. So I'm just going to get out a little bit of my new Gamboge, and I'll use some of my Indanthrone blue that I have sitting here, and I'll just make a green. I'll just go ahead and move it up here so you can see better. And then I can just take my brush and make some shapes. Now, depending on how light or dark you might want these things, it may be harder to see once you've got it on your painting. Plus, the tracing paper does add, there is just a little bit of, it's not quite clear. So you can see through it, it's transparent, but it's not quite clear. So it does allow you to see how something might look, but it maybe won't be the perfect solution. So then once I did that, once I had my shapes, and I actually think I started, there's another one here. I think I had one over here and one down here or something like that. And I took some pictures, and then I looked at it for a while. And I have really for several weeks now thought about whether or not I want to add some dark in that corner. And I finally decided that yes, it does need something in that corner, because without it, it's just a little too light, and it doesn't quite keep the eye up here on the birds. So having that darker corner does make the motion here, the eye of the viewer follow kind of through the hummingbirds, and it adds also another layer of depth in the painting, so that it feels like there's something up close, and then you see the birds and the flowers over here, and then you get that blurry background. Whereas if it's just the blurry background, it loses a little bit of something, and the depth is not quite as strong on this side. It's better over here, but I was trying to work with that. So then in the end, and please ignore my little painted piece there, in the end, it will be 3 pieces here, and then I decided to overlap that one and this piece over on this side, so that there's a little bit more higher up, and then I'm leaving kind of the middle a little open, and it complements that other side. The other part of putting something in this corner is the balance of the painting for me feels more correct. When you're talking balance is your shapes and their values and the color. So there's several different things having to do with balance. But without the darker shapes on this corner, it feels kind of like everything is leaning toward the right side of the painting. And I needed that darker shape down here to kind of balance that big dark that's on the right side. Okay, so that's method number one, is to use some tracing paper. And then the second method, I have to bring a tablet over here first. This is called Duralar, the acetate alternative wet media film. So what you're looking for is, maybe it doesn't have Duralar on there, but it should say wet media film. But this is the tablet that I use. It's 14 by 17, and it has 12 sheets, but you can use them over and over. And you want to make sure that you can use it with wet media. So I don't use this with anything that's permanent, like a permanent marker. You actually can make grids and things. That red thing is not part of this tablet, but I have made grids on there. However, over time, the oils from my hand, if I use that grid and move my hand over it, over time those grids can kind of wash off a little bit. And this tablet has seen lots of use because it's kind of run down, but basically each piece of clear film that's in there, and you can see this has paint on it, so this is when I was also trying to decide if I wanted to do anything in that corner, but each piece of film is reusable and you can clean it off. So I'll show you that first. Let me just take my brush and a little water so I can just get those areas wet, and do make sure that you know where you're doing this if you've got it over your painting, because you don't want to accidentally run water or paint over your painting. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and just ignore that stuff over there. There is one area on my painting right here behind the main hummingbird that I'm trying to decide if I want to darken this shape right up in there. And the reason that I'm thinking I do, and I don't necessarily want to make it as dark as the background, I just want to put a little more color in there, is because when you have a very light area next to a dark area, that the contrast between that light shape and that dark shape will draw a viewer's attention. So I really want the attention to be down here on the hummingbird's head and body, but not necessarily this shape that's back there. So what I'm going to do is, I'm trying to decide if I want to try cobalt, which I do have in the flowers over here, so maybe I'll start with that and see what I think. When you're using the Duralar, and also on the tracing paper, generally having less water in your mix, so more pigment, less water, it will work better than if it's really wet. And it doesn't always stay in place perfectly. It depends on how used the plastic is, and if when you wiped it off last time, if it left a little bit of a residue. But it works well enough, and also if you take it off of your riser, that usually works better too. So you can get an idea by painting in some color and then deciding, do you like that better? Do you want to sit with it for a while and maybe decide, sorry, I'll try to block those areas that have the really bright light. So it is a way that you can paint over something, and I could also do something down here just to give you another idea. Let's see, let me take some of my red, which is the Quin Coral, and I could maybe decide, well, what if I want to darken this red there Maybe I want to put some more red down in here on those guys. And you can see it is beating up, partly because I probably need to clean this a little better. There may be a way to wipe this down better than I have recently. And sometimes just turning it over on the back side, it works better. But it does have a little bit of a, so see, you can see it stayed better right there than it did in some of those areas. So I definitely have used this sheet before. Now I can move it and look at my painting and then see if it feels like I needed those things back. And I do kind of feel like I want to put some color up here. It may not be the cobalt. I'm going to try a corner over here. Let's see. And actually, I will just take the back of the tab. Oh, that would be messy. Never mind. Take a piece of paper. I just want to get rid of the glare that's on there. Okay. So if that gets some color on it, that's fine. Okay. And then I'm going to use some of my cerulean. And let's see if this stays in place any better. And I don't want this change over here to be too strong or too dark in value. And I might actually fade it. So I might have the upper piece of that section be a little bluer and maybe darker. And then as it comes down toward the beak, I may put a little water in there. I may even bring just a little bit of that color under the chin of the hummingbird. And then that way it kind of connects up above and let this lighter area be there. But that is something that I'm still kind of playing with and trying to determine if I want to make a change. I do like the cerulean better, I think, than the cobalt. And it's just whether or not I want to do that. So one of the things I can do, though, is before jumping in and going really dark with it, is I can put some water in there and just put a little glaze or a layer of that cerulean and let it be a light value, and then I can slowly build it if I decide I want it to be a little darker. So that's method number 2, and next is the final method. Okay, so I am going to show you the third method now, and I will just share my screen here, and you can see I have my image. So this is just a photograph that I took of my painting, and the background by the flowers was a little too busy for me, and I hadn't finished the flowers at this point. They were just started, but I felt like I needed to adjust this area. And so one of the ways to see if I can adjust it or if I want to adjust it is by using a computer program. So you may not have access to this exact program, but you may have some kind of software that you can do this with. You can also go on Zoom and you can use their annotate tools to try things on a painting. So if you don't have this exact method, there are other ways to do it, and you might just search for those kinds of things. But basically what I'm going to do is just copy some of this dark area that's on my painting. And it's not going to be perfect. I'm not trying to make this look exact, but by just taking some of that local color, I can get an idea if I want to actually make that change before I do it. Let me get a smaller brush here, and then I can go into some of the areas by the flowers that are smaller. And by doing this, it is a way that I'm working with my actual painting, and again, it's not perfect, but it can help me see if making those changes prior to actually doing them on my painting will be something that I want to do. And then I would have to maybe adjust my color from what I'm using here, or I may have to adjust the amount of the value, so it could be a little lighter, a little darker. And then you have already seen, because I've shown you my painting in the other two methods, I did make that change. So for better or worse, I did darken those areas, and I did go in around some of the flowers as well. So down in here I darkened, and then this whole bottom section ended up getting darker as well. And I can't remember when I was trying this method of just testing it on my photo of my painting, if I actually did darken down in that lower right, but basically this gives you the idea of how you can test something. So that is the final method, and I hope it was helpful to see different ways that you can try things on your painting to see if you want to make that adjustment before jumping in. And sometimes I'll do this kind of thing and sit with it for a while and then think, no, I'm not going to make that change. And other times, you know, it is a painting after all, and if I decide to make a change and then I end up not liking it, I'll start the painting again if I really am in love with the painting. So sometimes you can lift things back as well, but for me it is an easy way. These three things are good ways to try to see if you want to make those adjustments without maybe overcommitting, and give yourself some time to think about it. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope you have a good day and happy painting. See you next time. Bye.